You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
All right, here we go. Tuesday edition of Leafs Morning Take presented by Bet365. It is Nick Alberga and Carter Hutton as we inch closer and closer to the NHL draft on Friday, rounds 2 to 7 on Saturday from Peacock Theater in Los Angeles. What's up, Huts? How are you, bud?
I'm good, buddy. You feel like you came out of the chute hot there today. I like that. A lot of energy. It's coming in hot. Draft day, free agency coming, lots of moving parts. I always love this time of year. Not necessarily always as a player, but I like how the landscape changes, right? Like you always have our ties, who you think is going to land where, and now it's time we find out in the next week here.
Yeah, the chaos just beginning, and it's funny. We had the conversation yesterday because the news broke from Elliot Friedman that Trevor Zegras is out there and that Anaheim could execute a deal at any second. We get off the air, and Zegras is traded subsequently to the Philadelphia Flyers, but we both said no thanks from the Maple Leafs perspective. But this just starts, I think, the domino effect of what I expect to be a very crazy and busy next 2 weeks in the NHL. And I think the rarity of it all, too, like if you recall last year, and maybe this is why the Florida Panthers Huts on such a massive bender, is the fact that we actually have time from game 6 of the Stanley Cup final till night 1 of draft night. And I think that opens up more avenues, more opportunity. And I think a lot of people in Leafs Nation waiting with bated breath for the first Leafs move to fall here.
Yeah, I think so, right? It's kind of that black cloud that's been waiting over this team and what's going to happen, where it's going to go. And that being said, again, you look at Florida Panthers too, and I think Brad Marchand might have did a good job of that on his social media account, thanking all the teams that players were traded from or picked up from. And now teams are sitting there and again, in a league that has a salary cap, and we talk about having to grow from within. Zegras is the first one to move where they think they have value, think the Flyers can help them out. And talk about going from a place where you were pretty protected, from going from Anaheim. Now you're playing for the Philadelphia Flyers, and you can't take a night off. They're going to be all over them all the time. The fans, it's a tough place to play. But that being said, I think for the general NHL and landscape, you're assessing your team, right? You watch the playoff, you see the pattern of what it takes, and you need that grit and depth. And now teams are, they got to start pulling the trigger here because it comes on fast. And winning the President's Trophy and finishing, 9th and 11th, the 2 Stanley Cup finals, how they finished in the regular season. So it just goes to show you got to be built for the playoffs if you want to win the Cup.
Our Super Chat charity partner this season is Sick Kids. Want to make sure their question or comment gets on the show. Hit us up with a Super Chat. Proceeds from our Super Chat will go to Sick Kids, ranked the #1 research-intensive children's hospital in Canada and 3rd in the world. I don't know why this is coming up, but you have any issue with the way the Florida Panthers are partying these days?
No, I don't care. It's all the only thing I didn't like is the telling off McDavid. I just think that's kind of like who cares, you won. You got Evan Rodriguez up on stage giving the finger. Come on, Erod, you're dust compared to McDavid. I don't think that's a tricky one for me. But yeah, partying, I think you deserve it, man. You got to have it. And what I love is Brad Marchand, a guy who already has a cup, right? 14 years apart and just full tilt. I love it. As long as it's in good fun, there's nothing wrong with partying it up. You got to enjoy it because once that window passes, it's back to work again for these guys.
Exactly it. And I, for one, have been very, very impressed with the longevity and consistency of this Florida Panthers team since winning Game 6. They've been pinned for over a week now, and it's every day. And yesterday, I see they're at a pool. I think my MVPs thus far are Sam Bennett, Sam Reinhart, Matthew Tkachuk. These guys are full goers. And, it's a bit different than last year's. But I think the cool thing from the outside perspective is you sense a genuine disdain or hatred between the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers. And maybe it stems back to Matthew Tkachuk's days with the Calgary Flames and the Battle of Alberta. But I love the fact that two teams just hate each other like that. That's,
oh yeah,
it's different than we've seen in recent memory, right?
And that's what we want. We want rivalry. We want that spirited bouts when they play and the hate for each other. I just guess the only thing I didn't like is the attacking of the one guy. The guy's the best player in the world. I don't think anyone has the right to say whatever. I guess you have the right, but at the end of the day, just enjoy it, win it. And I love the rivalry. It's different to say we hate the Oilers. I think when you individually call guys out, that's different. But I love the party. I love Barkov just being pinned. A guy you don't really see much of, talking on Instagram live stories and just pinned and dragging him out of the club. Brad Marchand, a family man with his wife and a guy who doesn't really keep his nose pretty clean outside of media. It was just straight green light. Honey, you got your cup. we came down here, like, just give her. Like, the kids and I will be here in the next week when you're done.
That's all I could think about, honestly, watching all this is like most of them have spouses, and like they have not been seen at all since the team hoisted Lord Stanley. Like, is it just like a general green light special, do what you want? Like, they were at 11. They've been to elbow room 13 times. Like, they're doing it, man. And rightfully so. And I think it's so interesting from the Florida perspective as we morph into a conversation about the Maple Leafs. It's like now, it's so interesting to me because, like, Bill Zito, you win a Stanley Cup, you have a couple days to celebrate, and then it's back to the job, back to work. How are you going to find a way to keep Ekblad, Brad Marchand, and Sam Bennett? Like, those are the big conversations coming out of Florida right now, like a week removed after winning a second straight Stanley Cup here.
Yeah, it is. It is a quick turnaround, right? And that's something that is so wild. And I've been on a few deep playoff runs, not necessarily blood, sweat, and tear runs like these guys have been on. But I remember in 2013 when I was on the Hawks as the third goalie, I still had to skate every day. I still had to be there. Yeah. I wasn't playing, but I'm eating popcorn up in the press box. And then all of a sudden you get home, and next thing you know, it's like July 1st. And I remember that year, as soon as I got home, I flew to Nashville. I ended up signing with the Preds. And then all of a sudden you're like, I'm 2 months out from getting ready to go again. It's different if you're Matthew Tkachuk or you're an established player where you don't have that much pressure to be like 100% times training camp. But there's guys that are perimeter guys that may go somewhere else, that may be there, that are going to be fighting for spots. And now you got to try to rev it back up again. So it is a quick turnaround. And I do feel for management. I think maybe the physicality of it is a little different for management because Bill Zito's not worried about fitness testing. He's not worried about on-ice shape. But there's a mental capacity that goes into being prepared for the draft, prepared for free agency, because as a team that just won, you want to keep winning, and he's got to do a good job of trying to set his team up for success. So it is a very quick turnaround. I'd love to see the cup given out earlier, like end of May, start of June. You know, it's too long, in my opinion. I think when the weather turns, you start to lose that non-traditional hockey fan come summertime.
In support of Sick Kids, J-Rock, thank you so much for the super chat. Party up, but I didn't like Bennett talking about how dirty they played for everyone to cry about it. Bad luck from the guy who keeps injuring players, and I get that. You got to remember, too, these guys are absolutely pinned. I wonder more about the contract conversations with the microphone. Like, if you're Sam Bennett, you're saying 8 more years. Well, you better sign for 8 more years. Marchand's got the 4 up there. We're going to get to the Marchand conversation, too. But, yeah, I'm with you. I think I don't know how you scrutinize and try to chirp the best player on the planet. And all I could think about, do you want to poke the bear is my question when it comes to Connor McDavid, right?
Yeah, 100%. I just think I just think that side of it's a little classless. It's one thing to be like, the Oilers suck or something like along that lines. That's just general, what goes on in hockey. But to individually like go at Connor McDavid when it's like the ultimate team sport. Like, let's be totally honest here. You can't win as an individual in this league, in this sport. And Connor McDavid has continually proven it at the best level. You just look at the Four Nations Cup. He was the best player there, scores the winning goal on the biggest stage. So it's really hard to take a shot at Connor McDavid when it's based on give Connor McDavid a goalie. He's probably sitting in your situation holding the Stanley Cup in that opinion. So I think I'd squash that and just party, have fun, but keep it within the lines here.
I will say, as somebody who covers the Toronto Maple Leafs, I'm really, really envious of the Florida Panthers organization. That team is cocky. Imagine a day where Leafs Nation can get to a level where we're so cocky and we're like, yeah, we're going to win another Stanley Cup. And yeah, you think you've got us dead to rights. It's 3-2 in the series. We're going to come back. We're going to beat you. And I can tell you it sprays across the organization, the media, the fans, executives. I don't want to call them cocky specifically, but they're very, very confident in their team. And imagine we get to a day like that in Toronto where you wake up every day, regardless of the score in a game or a series, and you just know your team is going to muscle back. I think they've earned that cockiness, honestly.
They have, yeah, I agree with that. I think it is earned. It's something that comes with the right of the way they play. And the fact you talk about just repeating and the way they've talked about they're addicted to winning. You hear Matthew Tkachuk just calling them a dynasty. And then embracing the rat mentality, the rat pack. Like, it's just like this thing that is so... Like, it felt like in Boston when he was called a rat, it was something he never embraced. Like, it was kind of that, like, unforeseen thing. And it wasn't a good quality, right? It was like Brad Marchand's a rat. He's the guy that's going to slew foot you. He's a piece of shit out there in the game. Everybody hates him, right? The stuff that goes on. And then to see these two worlds collide, Matthew Tkachuk, what he's done to Edmonton in years past in Calgary, and then the fact Sam Bennett, punching out Brad Marchand, knocking him out of the playoffs. And they play in the Four Nations. Then they join forces, and now these three are the rat pack. And it's something that's just embraced in the way they play. So it's funny how it organically kind of happened. But that sense, they back it up every single night. And again, another cup, it's really hard to argue with the way they act.
In support of Sick Kids, Eric Martin, thank you so much for the super chat. Leafs should not spend much on July 1. They should save cap money for next year's trade deadline. This year, go get Mangiapane, Jeannot, and Brandon Tanev, of course. And that'll be the unique mindset as we get closer and closer. A week from today to July 1 is how the Maple Leafs, what they do, how much money do they spend, and obviously moving on from Mitch Marner. I mean, just because you have the cap space doesn't mean you have to use it, Huts.
No, I agree. And I think that, in a sense, is a valuable tool to have that cap space as it goes. Because, again, now in a thin market, right, you rush and you oversign guys. And how many times have we seen that, Nick, where you sign a deal at free agency, and then all of a sudden you're married to that deal. It's a 6-year deal, 7-year deal, and you give this guy too much money because he is the guy. Where at the end of the day, like, you can wait and see where teams are at. Because how many teams next year – around, halfway through the season, they start looking at, okay, our playoff chances are slim. And now we have an RFA or we have a UFA that's like, we're ready to move on. We don't like this guy. And now you have that cap that is so valuable. So I think that being said, everyone's so paranoid if Marner obviously walks the 100 points. How do you replace it? I'm not paranoid with that at all. I want to replace guys that are going to be point getters in the playoffs. Like, who gives a shit about 100 points in the regular season? Look at the teams that get in the playoffs, right? Like, Florida didn't have much for points. Carolina doesn't get a lot of points individually. They find a way to win playing the right hockey. And I think those points are going to start to drop off with the way Craig Berube coaches and the way they play. So at the end of the day, let's get guys that are going to be good in the playoffs.
There's this concern out there for some reason in Leafs Nation that this team's going to miss the playoffs next year. I've been saying this consistently for 2 weeks now. You have Matthews and Nylander. I don't know if Tavares comes back. Marner specifically is not coming back. If you can't make the playoffs with two bona fide stars in Matthews and Nylander, we need to have a bigger conversation, plain and simple. The Sheet Draft Special will be live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube channel on Friday, June 27th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time with Jeff Merrick and special guest Pierre Maguire. Pick by pick, they'll cover every second of the 2025 NHL Draft with sharp analysis and real-time reaction. Don't miss the Sheet Draft Special, live June 27th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on the Daily Faceoff YouTube channel. Meantime, the Daily Faceoff live free agency special will be coming in hot on July 1st, starting at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. 3 straight hours of chaos, contracts, and full-blown free agent frenzy, hosted by Tyler Remchuk with analyst Jeff Merrick, Colby Cohen, and Johnny Lazarus. Puckpedia founder Hart Levine, and our player panel of one Carter Hutton and Matthew Barnaby, plus several of our reporters from across the Nation Network. July 1st, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, Daily Faceoff live, free agency special, live on the Daily Faceoff YouTube channel. Coming up in about 12 minutes or so, Andy Strickland, host of the Cam and Strick podcast that you know very, very well from your time in St. Louis, right?
Yeah, I think the show started after I was gone, but I got to know Strick. He worked for the team. He was always around. Good dude, always was really good to me. He was actually good friends with my agent, so I kind of had that introduction when I first got there. And they've been doing well. Honestly, that show's been great. Cam Jansen is an absolute beauty. The way he played the game is just kind of the way he podcasts too. Lots of energy, high intensity. Yeah. So it'll be good to have Strickland on. I feel like he's been dropping lots of heat lately. He's got a lot of good takes and a lot of insight, so it should be fun to interview.
Exactly it. Janny's a beauty first and foremost. Had a chance to interview him quite a bit when I was on NHL Network Radio, and he covers obviously the St. Louis Blues, played for the Blues and New Jersey Devils. But yeah, Strick's been dropping bombs left and right, and my ears perked up when you said he knew your agent, because I'm wondering where he's getting his information from. We got Andy Strickland coming up. I'm not going to ask him that directly, but he's been very in touch with what's been happening on Mitch Marner, Sam Bennett, and other key figures as we get closer and closer to July 1, again, which is a week away today. At the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. So let's get to the latest news and notes. I put out a tweet yesterday about there being a good chance that Brad Marchand re-signs in Florida. There's been speculation. I know Biz Nasty's been all over this, that maybe the Leafs have an offer or will have an offer. Important verbiage there. Will have an offer around 4 times 9 for Brad Marchand. If that's an offer that is from anybody, never mind the Maple Leafs, think Brad Marchand's leaving Sunrise, but I do feel like they're really trying to work difficultly and hard at trying to find a way to re-sign Brad Marchand.
Yeah, I think if someone comes over the top with a 4x9,
That is a lot of dough, dude.
That's going to be really hard for him to stay in Florida. I think, that's a lot of dough, especially at this point in his career when he's had friendly deals, and this is his last big payday in that sense, right? And the fact of the matter is, people forget, I think, at times because of how well he played in the playoffs. This guy just came off 3 or 4 surgeries last year, and he was brutal at the start of the year. You're not far removed from having those surgeries again. I know we see Corey Perry, and I think a lot of people lose that grasp of how hard it is to get it done at this age because Brad Marchand has done so well. But you go 4x9, you might be in a different situation where maybe you're not getting that third line matchup where you kind of had his way in the playoffs, where he's going to have to play more hard minutes. And I don't know if it's sustainable. I think it's tough, but they will do their best to try to keep him. And I'm sure Brad Marchand would enjoy having a pool in his backyard and living in Florida after all those years on the East Coast in Boston. But 4x9, man, I think he's gonzo if that's something he gets to.
That would reek of desperation from the Maple Leafs front, that you're putting all your trust in a 37-year-old. I understand Brad Marchand's like a unicorn and he would be beloved in this market and he's killed this team for almost 20 years now. But to suggest you give him 4 years again at 37 and $9 million per season, I think you're just asking for it. Much similar. Yeah. Not to compare it to the David Clarkson contract back in the day where the minute that was signed, you knew they were fucked. Okay. I can tell you if Marchand signs 4x9, the Maple Leafs are fucked.
Yeah, 100%. It's different when they got when they added Joe Thornton or they added different players, Marleau and Wade and Simmons and Spez. Those are all taking friendly deal. They just wanted to come try to play for the Leafs and help out and win and be leadership role. Or this is you're paying him to be a stud. 4x9 is a ton of money. It's going to be weird how much he demands because it is a unique situation, right? At 37, at the wear and tear he has. But that playoff performance, man, everyone's willing to take a chance, I think, after watching that.
Yeah, I think so. He set himself up perfectly. So did Sam Bennett. You have a postseason like that. Let's not forget who the runner-up was for the Conn Smythe Trophy. It was 37-year-old Brad Marchand, and that translates to success in the free agent market. It is the perfect storm, but I think you bring up a good point. If you recall, entering the season, Brad Marchand very dinged up. There was, a lot of talk at the Four Nations. What does this guy have left? He was primarily a fourth liner for Team Canada. And he made a couple of big plays, but he looked a step behind. And now you're willing to go potentially 4 years. Never mind the lucrative money that you're going to throw his way. This can't be their big move, in my opinion, because I think to your point, Huts, I think the one thing that really helped Brad Marchand in Florida was the fact that he's playing on the third line minutes, playing with Baby Barkov, Lindell, and Luster-Ryan. And you put him in Toronto, he's now a top 6 winger. He's potentially playing with Austin Matthews. He's obviously going to play with Nylander or Matthews, and he's going to maybe have Tavares in the mix too. The matchup game is a lot different, and I think it's got to be buyer beware from that scenario. I do think it was the perfect fit in Florida for Brad Marchand. And there's obviously a lot he's weighing, and he wants to get paid and all that. But do you really want to leave the Florida Panthers is my question to him.
Yeah, I agree. That's the toughest takeaway from this is the slotting was so perfect. And how many times have we seen that even just on the Leafs where one guy gets hurt, they have a great thing going, and then all of a sudden someone has to play in a different role or a different matchup or different minutes, and they're not ready for it, right? But that being said, that's why I don't love the idea of spending too much at free agency because, again, now you have guys that haven't really been given an opportunity that maybe you can slot a bit different and see where it fits. I don't think you're in a race because you're still a great hockey team. You still have Anthony Stolarz. You still have Joseph Wall. So as you start to tinker with lines and give guys more opportunity, because once you go to free agency and overpay for somebody, there's no turning back, right? You're stuck with that deal because no one's taking it. And I get there's that upside of what he did in the playoffs, but at 4x9, man, I think you could do 2 or 3 players for that price and make your team a lot better than just having one and having to just really hope for the best on a wild card.
I think there's going to be a bit of sticker shock here in free agency too because of the salary cap going up where somebody traditionally you look at as a $3 million player gets paid like a $5 million player. And I think people have to brace for that type of impact. Should note as well, it really feels like Aaron Ekblad is headed to market. I just think he's going to get way too much. And I think that's just part of the impact of free agency. But again, we know Florida, they do the unexpected every year. It seems like they're going to lose a guy. They don't. So we'll monitor over the next week and see on that front. I wanted to pull you a bit about Patrick Kane. From what I understand, Showtime could be an option for the Maple Leafs on July 1 if he doesn't re-sign here with Detroit. But he's 36. That's a theme with this year's free agent crop outside some of the big boys. Some veteran presence for sure. 72 games at Detroit, 21 goals, 38 assists, 59 points. How do you view Patrick Kane here at 36 years of age?
Oh man, I love Patrick Kane. Great guy, great player, everything. But again, like what void does this fill? Like I feel like this role, if you lose Mitch Marner, you're kind of adding a poor man's Mitch Marner with Patrick Kane, right? So again, he could statistically put up points and help you get points, but if he takes like a lower number, but come playoff time, is he going to be relevant anymore at his age and the way he gets around the rink? That'd be my main concern with Patrick Kane. I still think he has value. His vision and space, he'd help the power play on a power play that struggled. But again, now you look at the role that gets played in the playoffs and what we just saw. Like who do you compare him to that we just saw in the playoffs? Like a perimeter guy, like the way, I don't know. I just don't see him having success. And at the end of the day, like I think playoffs, again, we're sitting here in June. I think the playoffs are a formality. But now how are we building a team to replicate? You still got to go against the Florida Panthers. Even if they get Marchand, let's say if they get, I think the over-under on them signing those 3 guys is 1.5, right? Like they maybe get 1 for sure. If they get 2, I'll be surprised between Ekblad, Bennett, and Marchand. Now you still got to play that team with that roster with Toronto. What is Patrick Kane going to do to help you beat the Florida Panthers would be my main concern.
I get that, but then you also look at the pedigree and the resume and you're like, shit, this guy's won a lot. And maybe you get to the playoffs and he can smell and sense another Stanley Cup ring and he really gets after it, like a Brad Marchand, what he just did with the Florida Panthers. Because let's be honest, it wasn't an afterthought, but Florida picks up Marchand. We're like, what does he have left in the tank? How will he fit with the Florida Panthers? And boom, he just takes off and he gets better and stronger in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I think that's from the perspective of the Maple Leafs. I would think I would do a 1-year deal with Patrick Kane and sort of like show me.
But it's a safer deal for sure, right? Safer.
Yeah. And I think from the Kane perspective, I can't bring him in and be a guy that he's going to play with Matthews and Nyes. Like that is an unfair expectation for a 36-year-old Patrick Kane. But I think that's what we're probably looking at if they miss out on these Marchands and the Bennetts of the world.
Yeah, but it might be safer to miss out on those deals too, right? Because everyone thinks that even the Bennett deal is going to be one that is like, we might look at the Bennett deal in 3, 4, 5 years down the road because he's going to get at least 7 years if he goes to free agency or if whatever, he's going to get whatever he wants. And I can't see him not taking max term because he knows that he's got to strike now, right? Especially the way his game won't necessarily translate year after year. And I think just the risk is a lot lower with Patrick Kane. And again, if Patrick Kane doesn't hit, he's a guy that you could maybe move off a deal too if someone's looking to add a little bit of scoring later in the season. But I just think grit, it just seems to show that Brad Marchand is more of that unicorn kind of player because he can offensively do it. And he has that just wherewithal during the playoffs to crank it up and be an absolute rat out there where I just don't think Patrick Kane has that in his game.
At the Leafs Nation 401, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Andy Strickland coming up. A lot of conversation out there about Vegas being primed to make a move, and it could involve Thomas Hertl. I wonder why they'd want to clear out money, Huts.
Yeah, I know. Getting suited up to get Marner on the books there. And, I don't know what comes of it again, but Vegas is always one of those teams that, like, when you think their back's against the wall, when you think they don't have cap space. I remember when they got Hertl, like it was at the end of free agency. I remember working that day and just being like, oh, the day's done. Next thing you know, Vegas just drops a bomb, right? So you never know what's going to happen there. And you've heard different talks about them moving guys out or where they're at. Because, again, I think Vegas is really close. Like they're not that far off from being a winning team. I think Aiden Hill wasn't great in the playoffs this year. I still think their back end, they have a lot of big bodies. They have a lot of good players. So I wouldn't be surprised if something drops. And imagine you're Mitch Marner. Like you go from being in Toronto and you get to go live in Vegas and the pressure's kind of off and you get to live on not a bad deal.
Yeah, that's a good fit. It really is a good fit when you look at Mitch Marner and what he's attempting to do and looking to move on from the city of Toronto. And I get why he's going out west. And I think that's a really prime landing spot. I was even going to ask you as a former player, what's your perception of Vegas? Because I, for one, I'm not sure how I'd feel about signing or playing there because, like they don't give a shit. They'll deal you tomorrow. And even Thomas Hertl has barely been there for like 7 minutes. And now all of a sudden he could be on the trade block. How would you feel about that, Huts?
Well, I think it is what it is, right? That's the cross you bear being a professional hockey player, right? I also think there's a ton of upside of being in Vegas, of where you get to live and what you get to do and being exposed to a pretty hell of an arena. I don't know if you've been to a game there, but it's absolutely
Oh
nuts,
yeah,
the atmosphere. It's
incredible.
a lot of fun,
Yeah.
right? So I think there is value there. And at the end of the day, if you don't perform, every organization's cutthroat, right? As long as you're getting your money, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, that's true. Our bosses are saying if you don't perform, you're off the show, Huts. But you always perform. You always bring it. We're definitely not getting the Buffalo Sabres version of Carter Hutton. We're getting like the St. Louis Blues version. So that's a good one. It's a very good one. The following interview is brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers. Get custom ring building delivered in less than 4 weeks with the Charm Masterpiece program and an unbeatable pricing policy. Charm Diamond Centers is proudly Canadian owned and operated since 1972 with more than 85 locations across the country through Charm and their sister brands. For more information, go to charmdiamondcenters.com as we bring in today's guest from the Cam Strick podcast, among other entities, It is Andy Strickland. What's going on, Strick? How are you, bud?
I'm doing good, fellas. Thanks for having me. How are you today? How hot is it up there in Toronto and in Ontario?
Buddy, it is cooking up here. I don't know. Yeah, it's something special, and so is the NHL market. It's starting to cook up quite a bit, man. I got to credit you. You've been all over everything the last couple of weeks, specifically pertaining to the Toronto Maple Leafs. We were just talking about Vegas. Is it your sense that Vegas is probably the team to beat on Mitch Marner here?
It just feels like it's the most Vegas thing, doesn't it? I mean, that's what Vegas does. I mean, they're always out to look. I was critical of them a few years back, especially with all the Pietrangelo thing, when that stuff was going on, and other players they went out and got even prior to him. It just felt like every star player that was available. It was like the shiny toy at Christmas. They had to have him, But, I've talked to Kelly McCrimmon about this, in the past. Listen, I give them credit, especially after winning a Stanley Cup and hearing from players who play there how well they're treated and how much they love being there. Now, there isn't always a lot of loyalty to a certain number of guys, who felt like they would be there longer than they were. And maybe some were promised certain things, Marc-Andre Fleury being one of those. But hey, listen, when you talk to the players and they talk about how they're treated, how the families are treated, how the wives are treated, they've got a good thing going. So this feels like a very Vegas thing. Not to mention that I think they want the player. They like the player. They feel like he'd be a good fit. I mean, they've got some stuff they've got to figure out in terms of, ways to fit him in from a cap standpoint, most notably Alex Pietrangelo's situation. And it sounds like, from what I understand, he's not going to play, so that money is going to be available. I look at a couple different teams for Mitch Marner, and I focus mostly out west. And I think Anaheim is the other team that can really sneak up and grab a guy like Mitch Marner. I think Joel Quenneville's got a lot of juice there in terms of his ability to recruit. You've got some other players too. It'd be a comfortable spot for a guy like Mitch. I mean, you talk about going from Toronto to Anaheim. They're an up-and-coming team. They're trying to build. Pat Verbeek's got a lot of credibility, too, in terms of, him speaking like a player, knowing how to speak that language to players from a recruiting standpoint. So I just look at those two teams, man. I mean, Utah obviously is a team that's been mentioned as well. Maybe they can, get it done. But I look at Vegas and I look at Anaheim as two teams that I wouldn't be surprised if Marner ended up at either of them.
Yeah, and Andy, I'm with you too. Again, I think there's a lot of appeal too of going to the West, right? You're going to somebody like a sunny state, and you've been in Toronto, you've dealt with winters, and you're getting away from that, like being in that market. But that being said, like you were, first to officially report Marner going to Toronto, like obviously a big deal. How do we get there? How did you? I know you got the inside. I know you've been at this a long time, but how do we get to that point?
Well, just by happenstance, to be honest with you, just talking to different people, obviously, who are, in the know that would certainly have an idea. And, it's one of those things, Huts, where I even asked a few people even prior to putting it out there, because I don't like putting stuff out there that's already out there. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know. Yeah. I'm not reading Twitter 24/7. Right, I'm doing this for a long time, and I feel like I've generated enough relationships and people who I know that I just talk to on a regular basis, more so than out trying to get the scoop all the time. Sometimes you're just having that conversation with people who obviously work in the business. But I don't follow everybody's reports out of Toronto. And I didn't want to put that out there if this was already, world news that everyone already knew about. Although I did talk to a number of people who said, hey, we kind of already figured this was the case anyway. So it was kind of an innocent tweet. I thought it would get a lot of attention. I didn't think it would get nearly as much attention as it did. which is fine. I mean, I'll take that from that standpoint. But, I mean, that was confirmation that I received, that particular day that he wasn't going back to Toronto. I don't know if that communication had been made to the team already at that point, but, I mean, just based on the feedback that you got from fans and other people in terms of how loud the news was after that came out, I don't think people fully expected that soon in the offseason. I think the overwhelming majority of people were thinking that he would, take his name into July 1, see what kind of offers were out there. And I think a lot of people felt like, hey, he would circle back to Toronto and say, this is the offers that I'm getting. Now let's see if we can get there. But I really don't believe this is about Mitch Marner trying to get the most money. I've said that several times. I think this is about him wanting a change of scenery, living in a different market, not dealing with as much noise that he deals with from playing in Toronto. And I don't put a blanket over all Toronto fans, but obviously there's, some stuff that's been going on behind the scenes where, from what I'm being told, he's had to have police presence outside of his house because of some of the threats that have been made. Listen, nobody wants to live like that. There's other great places to live. Hutz, you know this as well as anybody, because I hear a lot of former players saying, why wouldn't you want to play in Toronto? This is the greatest place to live. There's a lot of great places to live in the NHL. It's the National Hockey League. And you're still treated like an NHLer in other markets, believe it or not. People don't want to believe that. There's some great places to play throughout the NHL. This guy has never lived outside of Ontario his entire life. He grew up in Toronto, played junior hockey in London, as you know. Obviously, he's drafted by the Maple Leafs. He's been there his entire career. I don't blame him for wanting to do something different. And if that means experience a different lifestyle, he's got a family now, take it out west, good situation for his kids to be able to get into schools and great weather and all of that. And a chance to come up with a young team like Anaheim if he were to go in that direction, or have a chance to win with a team like Vegas. I think this guy really wants to win. And, he's also looking to do it, somewhere else outside of Toronto and get away from a lot of the noise and the distraction that he's been dealing with. Not to say that he hasn't created some of that either, because, sometimes he's part of that, right? He's created some of that distraction and a lot of that noise by not helping that team get over the hump, but it is what it is.
Yeah, that's my sense too. I think he's just tired of the bullshit. And I just wanted to add too that I'm right there with you. Like, it's one thing to be critical of a player as a media member or as a fan, but there's a line. You can't step over that line. You got to remember it's fucking sports, okay? People, like, I just don't understand how you get to a level where there's death threats to a player. Like, I think people have to keep that in mind and keep that in check. But from the Marner standpoint, so what is he after? Like, I mean, there's been so much speculation out there. Is it a short-term deal? Is it a long-term deal? A state tax situation? Do you have anything else to add sort of on the Marner front, what he's looking for here in free agency?
Well, if he's going to Anaheim, he's not looking for state tax, So, how much money do you need where the state tax, becomes an issue? I mean, this guy's going to get paid big time money regardless. But people have always thrown out the $14 million number. I don't think he's after that $14 million number or trying to become the highest paid player in the game. I think everyone would understand that Connor McDavid deserves to be that guy. And, once he signs his contract, he's going to be the highest paid player. And he shouldn't make more than Leon Draisaitl, who's going to be making $14 million. His contract kicks in next season. So, I think you got to use a realistic approach. And a lot of people have thrown that out there thinking, okay, I'm just going to go to any team that's going to pay me $14 million plus, whether it be Carolina or somewhere else. That's the main attraction. He can do whatever he wants to do. If he's going to make 12.5 to 13.5 million, somewhere in that range, and he wants to do a short-term deal and then explore free agency again 2, 3, 4 years down the road, I've got no problem with that. Guys who are making that type of money have that luxury and that advantage where they can make that decision, where other players obviously have to take the longest term that they can get because there is no guarantee that they're even going to be in the league 5, 6 years from now, or how they're going to be able to perform. Injury obviously can come into play as well. But I think when you're a guy like Mitch Marner, who's made as much money as he's made, I think he's going to be able to command the level of salary that he's going to get this offseason, then he has some options. So I'm sure a variety of concepts are going to be presented to him, anywhere from 2 years to 4 years, all the way up to 8 years in an effort to keep him there long term.
Yeah, and rightfully so. I guess I'd be one of those players that I was always looking for term, right? Because I didn't know I was always worried the next year I was going to have a seat at the table, right? And I knew if I got term, it was the best thing for me, right? But that being said, yeah. Sam Bennett, what a run, right? Like, how likely is it he goes to Florida? I know you reported last week in Toronto that Bennett's agent said, like, Toronto's not on that destination list. Like, he's worried. I don't know if he doesn't want to go there and be part of that. But that being said, like, do you think Florida can retain him?
I do. And I think that's their number one priority, is to keep Sam Bennett. And he doesn't want to leave. I think when you've won back-to-back Stanley Cups, there's emotion that's involved in it. Obviously, he's the Conn Smythe winner, which, only helps his, status inside that market. People trying to poke fun at how many people are at the parade and whatnot, depending on what, image you're getting. Some images, it looks like, there's, a million people there. Some images, it looks like there's, 500 people there. But who cares, man? They're the best team in the league. Florida's never going to be Toronto. They're never going to be Chicago, Boston. Even when the Blues won the Cup in 2019, I've never seen anything like it in terms of the number of people. It doesn't matter how much fan support they have, man. These guys are loving life, playing in South Florida, playing in the NHL. So there's a marriage there, and there's no doubt that, there's a deal to be made. I know people were throwing out $10 million and a lot of crazy salaries and numbers attached to Sam Bennett. But at the end of the day, everyone takes a deep breath and really comes to the realization of what you're getting, which would be a guy who could put up 50 points in a season. He's a second-line center. I mean, listen, those guys aren't going to make, $10 million a year. It's just not the reality of it. But I think he can get somewhere close to 8, if not north of 8, probably under 8.5. But still, when you translate that to a bigger market with a heavy tax, obviously it gets, it equals a $10, $11 million salary somewhere else. So he's going to be paid well. He's going to be, get the term that he's looking for as well. And when you look at where Sam Bennett came from, who he was when he was in Calgary, where they pretty much, gave him away. He was a healthy scratch down the stretch during his time in Calgary, couldn't find a real role. Now he's got a role. He's got status there. He's part of a winning team. He doesn't want to leave, and they don't want to lose him. So he's going to stay there in Florida.
And just piggybacking off Hutz's question, was Toronto even a discussion point with the agent and the player, or is it just something he just wanted no part of?
I don't think he wanted any part of it. I don't think he had his eye on any Canadian teams, to be honest with you. That was never really something, from what I understand, that he was, looking to explore, or get to free agency and end up being in Canada. But I can't tell you, Toronto was never a team that he was going to go to. I mean, listen, these guys have obviously played Toronto in the playoffs, and I'm not anti-Toronto, man. I don't want to come across like that. I mean, I was in Toronto in early May. I love Toronto. I love the fact that they're so passionate about the game, and there's so much history there with hockey. I think sometimes we get caught up in not understanding that there are a lot of other options for these players nowadays to go live and play elsewhere and not deal with a lot of the extracurricular that you're going to have to deal with. Listen, Toronto's great. If you're winning, I'm sure it's a great situation. If you're a star player, I'm sure it's a great situation until it's not. When you can't get it done in the playoffs and you're taking a lot of heat and you're taking some criticism, that's not for everybody. And I know people bring up the Dougie Gilmores and the Wendell Clarks and all these guys and, Shane Corsons. We've had all these guys on my podcast that I do with Cam Jansen. We've had long conversations with these guys about that. They didn't deal with a lot of the stuff that these players are dealing with today, especially when you look at social media and everything else that comes with it. And there's been heavy expectations with this particular group of players, and they haven't been able to get it done. So Sam Bennett knew he was going to have plenty of options. I just don't think Toronto or any Canadian teams were part of that.
No, yeah, and I agree with you, Andy. I remember when I first kind of came in the league, it was social media wasn't huge. So if we'd go to a bar, no one really knew who you were, right? Unless you told people. And then it got to the point where everyone knows who you are, right? And it's magnified in those markets. But that being said, would Patrick Kane be a guy that the Leafs could consider, where he's at, and obviously his status? He wants to win. He might take a friendly deal. You know how much money he's made over his career.
100%. And, he's a guy that wants to win again. So he's going to weigh his options based on which teams give him the best chance to win. Is that a player at this stage of his career that is going to get Toronto over the hump? I'm not so sure he is. Listen, Kane can still get streaky. I saw like a throwback Patrick Kane, and then there's games where you watch him play, and if he's not on the power play, he looks like an aging player who's no longer at the level at the from the player we saw from his heyday in Chicago when they were winning Stanley Cups. And it is what he is, or what it is. I mean, he's an older player. He's not going to be that guy. But I think Toronto, they've got money to spend. We'll see what happens with Tavares, because who knows how that's going to play out either. They're going to have to. Everyone keeps talking about team-friendly deals and trying to get players on the cheap. I mean, listen, when you're handing out the money to these guys initially, now you think you're going to get them on the cheap. I just don't know how realistic that is. People look at the Brock Nelson contract. I think Tavares is a better player than Nelson, to be honest with you. Tavares is a no-maintenance guy. He's quietly been producing the last handful of years. He's been scoring goals. He scores more goals than I think people realize, too. Why should he take less than Brock Nelson? If Colorado's going to get Brock Nelson, who's a year younger, $7.5 million. If I'm John Tavares, I'm not taking less than Brock Nelson. Although family considerations come into play, I don't know him personally, so I don't know what he's looking to do from a family standpoint. If the wife doesn't want to leave, if the kids are all set up in their activities and schools and whatnot, that's important to players. But you can't pay him what you've been paying him the last several years and then expect him to sign some lowball offer after he's been producing. I don't see it like that. But Patrick Kane, man, I could see him in blue and white, and the fans loving him. I don't know if that makes him a stronger contender than they were going into last season if they had Kane. But they're going to have money to spend, and they're going to have to replace these players. I think the trade market is where they're going to have to find a way to be creative. And that's what the best general managers are able to do. And they're able to fill spots through evaluating talent around the league, utilizing your pro scouting staff to improve your roster. And that's what they're going to have to find a way to do. It can't just be free agency and going and buying players. Look at the free agency list as it is right now. If Marchand stays in Florida, if Bennett stays in Florida, what are we looking at? I mean, I know there's some names and we want to have fun on free agency, but how many of these players are truly going to be franchise game changers that are going to really get you closer to winning a Stanley Cup? I don't see too many guys out there who can do that.
It has to be the trade market. And to your point, I think you cover a really, really great GM in St. Louis and Doug Armstrong, who, of course, is going to hand the reins off, it seems, in a year from now. But I wanted to ask you about that sort of relationship, and we'll get to Craig Berube. But the Brayden Schenn conversation is unique and obviously interesting, too. Like, what can you tell us, putting back the curtain to what transpired throughout the season in regards to Brayden Schenn? And we all know the Leafs are poking around at the trade deadline, too. Do you think he's a guy who's available right now?
Well, the mindset of the organization changed from prior to the trade deadline to where we are right now. I mean, when you look at where they were at, prior to the trade deadline, no one thought they were going to make the playoffs. Colton Parayko gets hurt the last game they played prior to the trade deadline. And, nobody expected that. I'll tell you, Jim Montgomery was a big part of saying, hey, let's keep this team together. Let's not lose our captain. And let's still try to take a run at this. They just got Cam Fowler, who ended up being, a huge piece of this team. I don't know where they would have been without him. Certainly wouldn't have made the playoffs if they didn't make that deal. And getting out in front of the trade deadline and acquiring a guy like Fowler for, a second-round pick or whatever they ended up giving up for him. Jeremy Biaka-Batuka. Remember Biaka-Batuka? I think his uncle was a running back back in the day for Michigan. Same family. Yeah. But that was just basically a throw-in just so they could get to the number of contracts that you're allowed to have in your organization. They had to move out of players. So they basically got Cam Fowler for nothing. But listen, there were other players inside the dressing room who Brayden Schenn is tight with. And listen, he is truly the captain. I mean, he's got a lot of respect inside that dressing room. He's tight with a lot of players. And there were other players whose names were also quietly being mentioned as potentially trade deadline moves, who also had no trade clauses. And they were telling Brayden Schenn, hey, if you're going to go, then I'm going to go too. If you're staying, then I'm staying. It was almost like a package deal with a couple of these guys. And, they made the right decision. They hung on to him. Schenn had a great finish to the season. He was good in the playoffs. We all know what he brings to the table in terms of character. But they also want to, push him down the lineup a little bit and make the team a little bit deeper, have him as a third-line center versus forcing him up the food chain as a second-line center. Doesn't kill penalties, though. Typically you want your bottom six forwards to be able to, impact special teams or have a role on special teams. So he can certainly still do that and get his minutes on the power play, but he's not a PK guy. And that's why I think Michael Granlund is their number one person of interest right now here in St. Louis. If they can get their hands on him, bring him into the fold as a second-line center. They've got Dalibor Dvorsky, who they drafted a few years back, 10th overall. As a 19-year-old last year playing in the American Hockey League, had over 20 goals. I mean, you just don't see too many teenagers produce at that level in the American League. this would give a little more time for him to kind of breathe a little bit and develop a little bit longer, unless he really blows everybody's socks off here in training camp and finds a way to make the team. But if you had Thomas and Granlund and Schenn as your top three centers, then they're still talking to Fox about trying to bring him back, see if they can get that done and have him back in place as your fourth line center. I think they like their depth up the middle. They'd like to improve the right side of their defense as well. That may have to happen via trade versus, free agency. I know people talk about Ekblad. I talked to a lot of people. There's a lot of varying opinions on Ekblad in terms of his ability to play at a high level and defend. I mean, we see him at his best, and he's surrounded by a lot of great players, but doesn't have the best feet. And there's some issues there, I think, some concerns. So, what's he willing to take in Toronto versus what is he going to command in the open market? So I don't know if that's a real option. Then you get down to the Cody Cece's and some of these guys on the right side. So your best option to improve your team on the right side may be via trade. But Granlund's the number one option. It doesn't look like Schenn's going anywhere right now. Now, Luke Schenn's a completely another question. Who knows what's going to happen with him there in Winnipeg? I didn't feel like he loved the situation there. He's got a family, and maybe that wasn't a great fit for he and his family moving forward in Winnipeg. So I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And if we could see Winnipeg potentially move Luke Schenn, but I think Braden Schenn, the Blues captain, he's got such a great relationship with the players and the head coach here. Obviously, he won a Stanley Cup with Alexander Steen as well. I just don't see him going anywhere now.
No, and I'm with you, Andy. I got a chance to play with Braden. I know him really well. He's such a great guy, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's a guy that just everyone wants around, whether it's management. And again, even if his game starts to drop off, you want him around your players. And that being said, I got a chance to play for Chief. He was the assistant when I was there. Mike Yeo, and then obviously Yeo, we know what happened with Chief, wins a Stanley Cup. What did you think of Chief's year, Craig Berube, in Toronto this year?
Well, listen, I think it's a little bit different for him. I mean, he doesn't like a lot of the extracurricular. I mean, Chief is the definition of a hockey guy. He wants to go to the rink, he wants practice, and then he wants to watch tape. He wants to watch hockey at night and eat wings and hang out with his coaching staff. That's what he's all about. So he's not into a lot of the extracurricular, like I said, and a lot of the attention that, obviously comes with Toronto. But he knew what he was signing up for at the same time. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken the job, But I think he handled everything really well in terms of dealing with the media and some of the questions that you're going to get asked, the same questions every single day. I mean, you know how it is here, Carter. I mean, it's a much different climate. I mean, there's days on off days where maybe you have 2 or 3 reporters at a practice, maybe a television station. But if it's a couple days before a game, you're not even going to have a TV station there, maybe a couple beat writers. So it's different. And you can get to know Chief really well. And you can sit down and he'll sit down and you'll have conversations and hot stove it and talk about things that are going around, around the NHL. You see him out at night at different bars. He's not hiding, So it was a comfortable situation for him. I think he loved it here. But I also think he loves the situation that he's in Toronto because he's got so much respect for the game and the history of the game. And he knows what's at stake. And if he's able to deliver in a market like Toronto, the rest of his life will be absolutely made. He's got a great opportunity ahead of him. I don't think he saw himself coming into the job and then losing Marner and potentially Tavares after the first year there. I think he thought he was going to have these guys for more than a year. So we'll see how that plays out. But I think he handled himself just fine, man. They won the division. And if you look at Florida, how they played the rest of the playoffs, I don't think anybody played them tougher than Toronto. They were right there with them. They beat a good, hungry, young Ottawa team, obviously, in the first round. So I think it's something they can build towards. And a lot of the issues that stood out under previous coaching staffs when they lost, I didn't get the same sense of frustration this go around.
We love Chief in year one here in Toronto and just scouring the market as well. It sounds like Vegas is up to something. We're going to find out, I'm sure, today or in the next couple of days. But that could pave the way, you would think, for Mitch Marner to end up with the Vegas Golden Knights. Strick, great reporting over the last couple of weeks, man. Really, really appreciate your time and have a great summer, okay?
Always appreciate it. Thanks a lot, guys. Guys, great to see you. Enjoy the summer, Carter. We'll see you, man.
Thanks, Andy.
See ya. That is Andy Strickland of the Cam Strick podcast. Make sure to go check it out. They had Brady Tkachuk on yesterday. Both those fellas doing a fantastic job out there in St. Louis. And it just seems like Vegas is up to something here, Huts. I know we talked about Anaheim. I know we've talked quite a bit about Los Angeles being a destination. I think, to Andy's point, this just screams Mitch Marner to Vegas, in my opinion.
That does. Yeah. I think it's that happy medium, right? Of like, you're still
Yeah.
going somewhere that can potentially win and you're protecting yourself a bit. And again, I think he did a great job of trying to explain that like there's other places to play. Like Toronto is the center of the hockey universe, and it's up to the individual, right? What they want, what they need. And again, there's a lot of good that comes with it, but there is some negative. And now as a family man and what's going on, it's a really good perspective. Talking about imagine having security outside your house when you're just trying to be a normal dude. And at the end of the day, it's all you are, right? Like you're an NHL player, but like you grow up from a good house, you're just normal. And it's tricky. It's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out.
It's time now for the last call, brought to you by Bet365. Whatever your bet is, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app and get in the game. Use code NATION. That's NATION, NATION. Must be 19 or older. Ontario only. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, visit ConnexOntario.ca. Any futures bets that you're looking at? I know I put a bit of money on the Jack Adams market last night. Patrick Waugh comes to mind. Who else was I looking at? There's a couple others. I think now is a good time to get in on the awards market and the futures market before teams make some big moves. Like, for example, Vegas. If you think Marner's going to Vegas, I think now would be a really, really good time to splash on Vegas to potentially win the Stanley Cup because the odds are going to be lowered, obviously.
Yeah. I think that would be the strategic play where you think teams are going to fall. And I don't know. I guess just the way I look at Winnipeg again, I wouldn't mind Hellebuck going back to back 3 in a row. Vezina,
wow.
You know what I mean?
3 in a row.
Where he's at. I honestly, I guess maybe they will start to alter his game.
Yeah, but Hutz, my only pushback on that is like, I understand back-to-back, but I think from the voting perspective, you need to be even better. It's like the whole LeBron debate. The guy can win the MVP.
I know, but I still
season.
think he's going to be up there. Like his game is just so tight in the regular season. He doesn't fatigue. It's like just easy. It's like too easy for him right now. Granted, it hasn't really translated to road games in the playoffs, but I don't know. I guess the pressure would be on that. And again, where the other team I would look to have a real push next year would be Tampa Bay with what they've done, some of those additions. And I think they'll be a hungry hockey team next year.
Hutz, excellent job today. I believe the next time we're together will be in the month of July. So great stuff. Enjoy the rest of the week and looking forward to seeing you on our coverage, whether it's free agency or maybe even the draft coverage. So excellent job. But looking forward to the next week. I mean, free agency starts a week from today. I think things will look drastically different, at least we hope here when it comes to the Maple Leafs.
I know, the new landscape, and it will be interesting. I hope it's steady as it goes, and I hope we're looking back with a bunch of cap space and they haven't made a bunch of drastic moves, but time will tell, Nick.
There you have it. Again, as mentioned, I am headed to Los Angeles tomorrow, so Zach Phillips will be in for me alongside Jay Rosehill, so stay tuned to the latest edition of Leafs Morning Take on Wednesday coming up. They'll have you covered on anything happening surrounding the Maple Leafs to get closer and closer to round one of the NHL draft coming up on Friday. Thank you to everybody in the chat. You guys are great at the Leafs Nation 401. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Leafs Morning Take wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. Thank you to Andy Strickland. Thank you to producer Vic for Carter Hutton. I'm Nick Alberga, and I'll talk to you from Los Angeles on Thursday. Take care, everybody. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.